Welcome to the show. I'm Jill McPherson. On today's show, we're talking about authenticity, about getting in touch with our true self. And often people are struggling with that question and wondering, what does that mean? So we're going to address that here today with my guest, Jordan Axani, who's had just those kind of questions and life experience that has led him on that path. And he's going to share that with us today. Welcome, Jordan.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start, Jordan. How did this all come about for you?
Well, I suppose the true story started a long time ago. I grew up north of Toronto in a small town and had a rough go. I bullied from a really young age, and growing up and all the way through high school and college and into my working life, I struggled with self-worth a lot, and I didn't feel like I had any community. I didn't feel like I had any close relationships. And I saw myself making up for that constantly in everything that I did. So not surprisingly, I was a total jerk to date, and I ended up splitting up with a girlfriend I was with for about 3 years, and I'd like to say it was mutual, but really I deserved it. Let's put it that way. And in the breakup, there was a very bizarre remnant of the life we could have had, which was 2 months beforehand. I'd purchased this unbelievable trip for us over the holidays. It was like 6 weeks, a bunch of continents all over the world. And lo and behold, in the wake of the breakup, I was down and out. And it was like, I saw this ticket, which was already issued to both her and I.
So you had already purchased these tickets?
Oh yeah, yeah. They
basically a trip around the world?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, essentially. And it was like 2 months after the breakup, and a friend of mine innocently asked, what are you going to do with this ticket, her ticket? And I said, I think I'm just going to let it go to waste, whatever. I'll just change the itinerary, maybe I'll go, maybe I won't, I don't know. I was down and out. Mm-hmm. And they responded jokingly. They said, well, why don't you try to give it to someone with the same name?
Oh, right, because it's all in her name.
Yeah, it was already issued. Like, we had the ticket numbers and everything. Gotcha. It was all done. It was locked away. So we laughed. I thought it was a ridiculous idea. I was like, what am I going to do? Like, message random people? And lo and behold, she had a fairly generic name. I mean, Elizabeth Gallagher is, as I learned, there's thousands and thousands and thousands globally. The next day, I was in a weird spot. I was working on a Sunday. I was at my office. And something came over me where all of a sudden I was like, you know what? She's gone. I'm not happy. I've been fighting this battle where I'm not enough for years. Money wasn't enough. A job wasn't enough. I wasn't enough, right? And without thinking, I went to Reddit, the social media site, okay. And I created an account. I didn't even have an account. I created an account instinctively. I don't know why. I wasn't really thinking. I was just sort of in flow of some kind. And I wrote a incredibly tongue-in-cheek post that essentially said, hey, if your name is this, and if you want a free round-the-world plane ticket, let me know. I said, and in the post I was very clear. I was like, this is not romantic. I don't even know if I'm going to go on the trip, but here's kind of what I have.
Right.
And it would seem like a shame to give it away. Or sorry, for it to go to waste. Yes, thank you. And I hit submit on the post without even thinking. It took me 10 minutes to write. Grammatic mistakes and everything else.
And at that point, what did you think would happen?
Nothing. I thought it was going to get voted down, because on Reddit you can vote up or down posts, right?
Oh, okay.
So things that are voted up get to, more eyeballs, essentially. And things that are voted down just sort of go into like the graveyard of Reddit, where all the lamest things go to die. And I thought I was just trying to clear my conscience, I think. Having said that, I mean, this wasn't my first rodeo in doing weird, bizarre things. And I know that culturally we're always attracted to things that are oddly counterintuitive. So I hit submit on it, and within like a second, I get a message from a moderator on Reddit that says, I took down your post, it's not of interest. And I said, why isn't it of interest? And what I'd done is I posted in the travel section of Reddit, like the generic global travel section. Okay. And they said, well, this isn't of, ironically, they said, well, this isn't of international significance, so you should just post it in the Canada section instead. Okay. And I almost didn't do it at that point. I was just going to be like, okay, forget about it. Yeah. Sign from the universe, right? Shouldn't go down that path. And a couple minutes later, I was like, came this far. And I copied and pasted it, reposted it, shared it on my Facebook wall, and said something idiotic like, this is the best idea I could come up with now. What was the exact quote after that? I think I said, don't fail me now, internet. And I went to bed. And woke up the next morning, and I was lying in bed and I was just scanning through my newsfeed and, looking on Facebook and reminding myself how everyone's life is so awesome and mine sucks, like we all do. And I noticed in the top corner, instead of like 1 or 2 notifications, or maybe 3 if it's a really good day and people love me, there was like 350 something. And I was like, I wonder what could be going on. Like totally forgetting that I had done this. And I clicked it and people were just sharing it and commenting it well outside of my network. And I gasped. I was like, ah! And I was still in bed at this point too. I'm on my side. And then I go to my email, and the first email I see is from a senior editor at BuzzFeed. And it's a 1-line email, and it just says, "Cool story, bro. Want to comment?" I'm like, story, comment, BuzzFeed, bro? What? There's a lot of not computing here. And then the next message was from someone at CNN. And the third email I saw, there was hundreds by this point, but the third email I saw was from a friend of mine that writes for Vice. And she was like, hold on, this is on the front page of Reddit. This is going to be wild. And what that means, I didn't know what that meant at the time, but what that means is if something's on the front page of Reddit, it means it's going to go viral. It is going to be in the global news cycle, almost unavoidably.
So it goes viral.
It goes viral.
And what kind of numbers are we talking when you say viral?
To date, that first week was over 1 billion media impressions, which basically puts any North American advertiser to shame. You can't buy that kind of impressions. So an impression is when it appears in the media, and then it has a pair of eyeballs on it. Now to date, the last time I heard the numbers, it was like 4.5 billion media impressions, which makes it, according to a bunch of professors that have contacted me, like public relations experts and professors, makes it the most viral human interest story ever, of the non-celebrity. I mean, Beyonce kills me all the time. Yeah.
You just can't compete with Beyonce.
I can't beat Beyonce. No, but it's massive. And why it got so big was a number of reasons, but the biggest thing was that it was truly global. A lot of things that go viral don't go global. This was on the front page of the Times of India 4 times. Yeah.
Right.
It was weird.
It was weird.
Yes.
And we're going to break there and come back and find out what that experience then brought you to today, what's happening now for you today with that. And we'll be right back. Welcome back. I have here today with me Jordan Axani, who became quite well known from his social media posting going viral. And so we were just talking about the whole story, building up to that. It goes viral, and Jordan, take it from there.
So it lasted in the global news cycle for about 6 months. I gave away the ticket to someone with the same name. I foolishly signed away all of the rights to do with this for TV and stuff to a bunch of major producers out of LA, which meant that I lost control over the narrative. And there was a very forced strategic effort to weave a romantic story out of this. This thing that was not romantic. This thing that was birthed out of heartbreak.
So, but you did actually go on the trip.
Yeah, it was terrible. It was the worst trip of my life.
And why was that?
Because it was filmed. We had a film crew dropping in and out, and we had to self-capture all this stuff, and we were contractually obligated to do that.
So the whole trip, which took about how many weeks?
I think we were gone for 5 and a bit. Yeah, the itinerary changed a bit, but yeah, it's
So the whole trip, you've got, paparazzi basically around you.
Oh yeah, we can go.
Following it.
We can go anywhere. You gotta understand. We would walk down the road in a random town in Thailand, and people would come up to us and pinch us and be like, "Oh my God, you guys are real." It was weird.
And they're wanting to see the hug, the kiss, you've fallen in love. They want the Hollywood story.
I still get messages from people to this day that are trying to settle betting pools about whether or not we fell in love or whether or not we were going to hook up or whatever on the trip. Yeah, it was being in the middle of a Cinderella story. The trouble was that wasn't the case for either of us.
Right, it just wasn't there.
Wasn't it at all? Yeah, and so by the end of it, I was falling apart because remember, so this is the side of the story that I certainly didn't talk about much publicly, and I do a bit now when I'm working with kids. But imagine being on the other side. Imagine being my ex, who is a fantastic, wonderful woman, and thankfully we're friends today. She was globally shamed. Her identity. We went to enormous lengths to try to keep photos of her offline, and her name was out there, but ironically, because it was such a popular name, she was able to kind of be anonymous. But then, the Daily Mail posted a photo of her and I at a wedding, 2 years earlier. And imagine that feeling. And then and then she lives in Toronto. It was on the front page of the Toronto Star.
She's kind of the bad person here.
She was painted as the villain. She was painted as the
Right.
nasty ex-girlfriend. When that couldn't be farther from the truth. I was the worst boyfriend imaginable. I mean, and this is what the heartbreaking thing was.
And it's good that you own up to that.
Absolutely. Well, and this is what I realized. So how it ended up playing out, and it was effectively, I fell apart. And I mean, because there was this huge divide between what was going on. Like, I was being rewarded for being salacious. I was being rewarded for giving into this media narrative, right?
Right.
And I could have had at that point almost anything. I mean, like, the TV deals and stuff were just flowing like crazy. But I had to sell out someone that I loved and hurt someone I loved. And I just crumbled under the weight of it. I absolutely crumbled. And when I crumbled, everything around me did. So any sort of, like, we created a charity, for example, to try to pay it forward with travel. That totally tanked. And then all of a sudden, like, we had this philanthropic TV show concept that was going to be like Extreme Home Makeover, only where you take families that are divided by war together to meet up. Amazing, right? That fell apart too. And everything just started to disintegrate around me.
So let me get this straight. You're falling apart because there's the Jordan, and then there's the story that everybody wants you to play.
Yes.
And you're like, could the real Jordan still, please
Well, and
stand
at that
up?
point, I didn't even know who the real Jordan was anymore.
Okay.
It was so confusing because this happens a lot. I have a lot of friends that have had weird brushes with fame. And what happens is, in your psychology, because you're being validated publicly, because you feel like a somebody, because you feel like you're enough, even if it's superficial, then you end up giving into it. But then beyond a certain point, you realize you're in a black hole. And you're staring yourself down. And it's really scary because in that moment, if you're like, okay, I thought this would make me feel enough, but if this didn't make me feel enough, then what's wrong with me?
Right.
So it got dark. It got really dark.
And fast.
And fast. I mean, so that was over the holiday season. By the next summer, I was basically in hiding. I'd locked myself away. I was, fortunately, I had a really great psychologist, but that wasn't enough. And it took, I wasn't returning anyone's calls. I cut myself off, like, from the world. And it took a friend of mine actually flying into the city I was in, virtually unannounced, and breaking down my door to basically pull the whole story out of me. And for the first time in my life, I put it all together from my earliest memories of being bullied and beat up as a kid, which a lot of stuff I'd suppressed. There was a lot of terrible things. It went on every single day for about 12 years.
Right.
All the way through to present day, and was able to weave that narrative, only to realize that I had been living this massive lie my entire life. And the lie that I was, and in some ways still am living, was that I convinced myself that I was okay, that I liked myself, when really there was an immense amount of self-hatred.
And was that at an unconscious level, do you think? Or is it just at this point you realize in past reflection of looking back?
At that point, I didn't know what was wrong. I knew there was some sort of incongruency somewhere. I knew I was depressed. I knew that there was traditional mental illness going on, but I didn't understand the depth and I didn't understand how that was being manifested.
So basically, you've hit rock bottom. Friend comes in and says, "What's going on?" And this takes you to where now?
And effectively, for the first time, I felt able to piece everything together. Okay, and then the reaction to that was really powerful, because I remember, him dragging it out of me and then looking at me and being like, that's all you got? That's it? I'm like, what do you mean? I just gave you my whole soul.
Yeah, for you it's huge.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
And then he goes into this story about a journey of his that happened long before I knew him. That was very similar. Different events, but same feelings. That was the first time in my life that during this darkness that I felt like, okay, maybe I'm not the only one that's experienced something like this. And maybe if one other person gets it, maybe two will, maybe three will. And like a lot of self-help authors and stuff, they would get very wax poetic right here and be like, it changed my life. That didn't change my life. It just gave me the courage to maybe speak to a couple other people.
So the good news is about hitting rock bottom is then it gives you only one direction to go. And when we come back, we're going to find out what direction that took you.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm Jill McPherson, and on today's show I have Jordan Axani, and he is here sharing his life story. And really the question is, what's your big lie? And how did that come about?
So, at rock bottom,
Right.
there was that moment of sharing, right? And then, oddly enough, a number of months later, I got a call through a friend from the RCMP. And they posed a very simple question. They said, look, we do this youth summit every year, and we're looking for a way to help students feel safe to share what's going on. And a lot of the traditional prevention measures that we're taking, going into classrooms and stuff, they just aren't working. And we know there's a lot of silent suffering. Just before that, and what we were working on after the viral story and after that moment of realizing I wasn't alone is I actually started to build a company. We were able to raise like venture capital pretty easily because the story was so big. So we raised some money to build an anonymous peer support app, only to realize that we had to kill the company because we took money from a con artist who we had to file criminal charges against, but that's a whole other story. Anyway, we got this call from the RCMP and they said, hey, look, you've built this platform, you have this bizarre story, you seem like kind of a all over the place guy, maybe you can figure out something wild that will be unique. And so I got on the phone with them and they said, look, in our smaller communities in Canada, we have record suicide, depression, anxiety, teen pregnancy, drinking and driving, all among youth, and we're freaking out, we don't know what to do. And they said, look, like we're gonna have all these kids from our communities together for these 3 days. What do you recommend? I sit on for 2 weeks, and I end up talking to a bunch of friends of mine that work with kids, and a really good friend of mine that's a psychotherapist and social worker, and we came up with this idea of a program called What's Your Big Lie? And the nature of it was that, I'd reconciled to myself that I'd been living this big lie, and I just believe that everyone does in their own way, shape, or form.
To a certain degree.
To a certain degree, absolutely. And I said, well, what if we use some of the same things we were doing through this app that we were building and give kids the chance to share what's going on from their phones anonymously? Can't be traced back to them while we're in a big room together. So like rather than just like a rah-rah keynote speech, why don't we have them on their phones sharing what's coming up?
So it's interactive.
Yeah, and then it has everything pop on these massive screens in real time.
Right.
Yeah. And so I wrote all this out to the RCMP, and I sent it off, and typical me, I was like, this is so crazy, it might work. Story of my life. And they emailed right back, and they were like, yes, absolutely. And I was like, oh man, we actually have to do this. Okay. 3 weeks later, I was standing in front of like 500 grade 7 students in Cranbrook, British Columbia, first day of this summit, and I'm like, I have no idea how this is gonna go at all. I'm just like sweating, and I get into the story. I start telling my story very quickly, and then I load the platform and say, okay, here's how this is gonna work, guys. I've told you my big lie. I wanna know what yours is.
Right.
And I put 60 seconds on the clock, and people are on their phones. And then a minute later, I change over the screens, and all of a sudden, it's just like a sea of like, my mom's addicted to drugs and it scares me. My sister's pregnant, I don't know what to do. I don't feel safe at home. My dad beats me up. My best friend told me that she's gonna kill herself. Like, those aren't even dramatic examples. Those are just like a sampling.
Right.
Like the heaviest of the heavy, grade 7s, okay?
Right.
And then at the end of it, these were 90-minute sessions. I had to tap dance a little bit because we like got through all of that. We're all crying. I ask other questions like, how do you remind yourself that you matter in your darkest moments? Like, we try to build resilience into it.
Right.
But at the end of it, I still had 20 minutes left, and I knew every guidance counselor in the room was going to like put a hit out on me because I asked the audience, I said, look guys, we're all here together. Does anyone want to come forward and share their story? In the flesh. We just use technology to be anonymous, but does anyone want to like take the mask off right here, right now?
Right.
Crickets.
Right, right.
But then after a couple seconds, a very brave young woman in the back row-ish throws up her hand. And I'm like, is that a hand? And the hand goes down. And a second later, it snakes back up. And she stands up and she walks to the stage with this sense of determination. And in my head, I'm like, oh man, I don't know how this is gonna go. And I whisper to her, I'm like, hey, sure you wanna do this? And she's like, yeah. And she grabs the mic and she just dives right in. I have the audio from it. It's powerful, in effect, without revealing any details. Everything that happens in these sessions is pretty sacred. But without revealing much, I mean, she told a story of being made to sexually abuse someone that was very close to her at a young age. And she explained the impact that had on her over time and how she was coming to terms with it recently. And she wasn't doing so good.
Right.
By the end of it, she just put her soul out there.
Right.
And there was silence, and then like all of a sudden there was like a standing ovation for like 3 minutes, and like the first like 8 rows of people like ran onto the stage and like mauled her. And then 5 more students after that came forward and shared their stories. At the end of it, I went and, with a guidance counselor in tow, I went and tried to find her, and I was just like verbal diarrhea, like, oh my God, that was amazing, oh, like, how are you doing, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, stop. And she looked at me dead in the eye, and she said, today was the first time in my life I was validated.
Validated, yeah.
So that moment, to jump forward to today, so we realized we had something pretty powerful there. And we realized we had something provocative too.
So that was the first go, and then
Ever.
now it's just snowballed. It's
Yeah,
like
I mean, we're
high school students.
Yeah,
It's-
we're a year later now, and we've done 150 of that style of events, plus about another 30 or 40 of, like, I do workshops and we do pop-up exhibits. We do a bunch of stuff with it. It's just grown like crazy.
So you're dealing now with not just young people, but you've got the dynamics of young people right up now to
Yep.
dealing with adults,
Yeah,
professionals.
grade 4s all the way up to senior executives. Yep, and what I've learned from that is that we all have something inside that has manifested itself in a bunch of different ways. And what's amazing about the What's Your Big Lie program, and I did not intend for this to happen, right? This was an accident. What's amazing about the concept of a big lie is that because it's not just using the term like depression, anxiety, or anything that we know, it's a concept that actually makes sense of a lot of the different feelings that we have, whether it's related to emotional wellness, whether it's relating to how we're living, whether it's relating to our interactions with technology.
Right.
I mean, we're hurting right now on a very deeply profound level.
And when we let go of the big lie, or
Yep.
when we share the big lie, what's that do for us?
We feel that we're not alone. And I
Okay.
can feel it every single time, in every session. As soon as we put those responses up, you hear a gasp in the room. You can feel it.
So the benefit is you have a sense of you're not alone.
Yep.
You have a sense of now that is lifted off,
Yep.
now I can get in touch with my authentic self. Is that?
Yes, absolutely. It normalizes the pain that we suffer from, right? So that's one piece. But the more profound piece is that we play connector to make sure that people with similar things are supporting each other. So we have a whole curriculum now that's designed to get students or professionals or whatever to gravitate towards each other if they share similar challenges and feel safe to do so, which is beautiful because we don't know everyone's story around us. So the end goal of it is not just to demonstrate that we're not alone empirically. That's the first step. The real part of it is to build a sense of belonging in the communities that we touch. Yes.
Right, and connection.
Absolutely.
I mean, wasn't it Buddha who said that everyone's got a struggle, that a battle that we don't know about, and so that's really speaking to that. And then now, can we come together as a community?
Totally. And there's a hunger to share that struggle right now. And I think I definitely see it in kids, but I see it in every segment. We are hurting to the point where we know something's got to give. We need to have that release valve.
Great.
And so, given the opportunity to share, it's cathartic, and most importantly, it's empowering to others.
And that's where we're going to end off right there, Jordan. Thank you so much for your story. Thank you for what you have done with your own challenges, turning it around, helping others, and making a difference. And I really appreciate that. I appreciate you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Jill McPherson, and remember, love is always the answer.
My name is Jordan Axani. I'm a social researcher that once upon a time went viral. And in that experience, I started to look at my life and the lives of others in a whole different way. I realized that I was an imposter in my own life, and I had no idea. And now I have the incredible privilege to work with students, employees, and everyday people on helping them kill their inner imposter and embrace who they really are. So what I learned from that experience is that everyone is living a lie, big or small, to do with their working life, their relationships, their community, sometimes all of them, and that we don't really talk about it. So we end up wearing these masks. And when I go and speak to schools and companies all over the world, this is what they're struggling with. During the What's Your Big Lie presentation, I ask 2 questions. The first question is, of course, what's your big lie? And then I ask, in your darkest moment, how do you tell yourself that you matter? We've built a custom mobile platform that allows the audience to submit their big lies anonymously.
My big lie is that I'm always happy and confident. My big lie is I'm terrified of not being happy. My big lie is I haven't told anyone about my anxiety disorder.
Opening up this kind of honesty and openness at schools is very rare. For the first time ever, these students are opening up to each other.
we're getting hugs, tears, standing ovations, applauses, incredible validation and support of what we're feeling inside. The culture of belonging emerges at these schools in the days, weeks, and months afterwards. Because What's Your Big Lie is just the catalyst. And over time, we see a difference. And that is why I believe so much in this project and why I'm so thrilled to bring it to the world. You can read more about What's Your Big Lie at yourbiglie.com, and you can read more about me and my journey at jordanexani.com.